Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we're going to be studying Joshua chapter 4. I apologize for the background noise that you're going to be hearing through the video, but for me to complete these in a timely fashion with any kind of consistency, I'm going to have to do these when I have time to do them. And so you're probably going to hear that background noise when I'm using my laptop. Today we're going to be still covering the crossing of the Jordan, and there's going to be a couple of major things to cover as we cross the Jordan. And we're going to look forward into the New Testament a little bit. We're going to talk type, antitype, and we're going to also deal with those 12 men that were mentioned in chapter 3. So let's get started in verse 1. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean, passed over Jordan, that Jehovah spoke unto Joshua, saying, Take you 12 men out of the people, out of every man a tribe. Now, out of these 12 people, note that Levi is not going to be included in that. Levi is hardly ever included in any listing of the tribes because they don't take part in the land promise. They don't have a section of land that is all their own. They are supported by all the other tribes. They are separate and holy as a priesthood, and so they don't take part in that. So verse 3, it says, And command ye them, take you hence out of the midst of the Jordan, out of the place where the priest's foot stood firm, 12 stones, and you shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where you shall lodge this night. Okay, so what's going to happen is you have the priest step into the river, and when their feet touch the water completely moves out of the way, and it goes way, way upstream near this town called Adam. And it's not just like a 5-foot crossing. It's a broad crossing like we talked about in chapter 3. And then, of course, the waters start to dry up as they head down towards the Dead Sea, so that you can get not quite 2 million, because remember, you've got 2.5 tribes that are not going to be crossing over. Just the men of those tribes are going to be crossing over. And you have this very broad crossing. And as they go across, the priests that are carrying the Ark of the Covenant are going to stop in the middle of the river. We talked about how that represented God being with them in the midst of the flood as they come out on the other side. As they cross, these 12 men are supposed to stoop down and pick up these stones. And we're going to talk about the size of those stones here in just a minute. But that's the picture that we get as they're going across. And it says, verse 4, Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel, out of every tribe a man. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of Jehovah your God into the midst of Jordan, and take you up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel. So what they were supposed to do is they were supposed to go and pass the ark. And as they passed the ark, they were going to stoop down and they were going to pick up a stone that they would have to put on their shoulders. So these are big stones. They're not little rocks. They're not going to put them on the windowsill as kind of a memento. They're going to pick up these big stones that they would have to then carry on their shoulders. And as they carried them on their shoulders, what they would do is when they came to the place where they were going to stop for the night, is they were going to build a little pile, a little noticeable pile of these stones in an ordered configuration to be a sign to Israel for the next 1,500 years or so that this is where they crossed the Jordan River, and it will be a remembrance to them. So this is an important event. It's not just something that you read about in a workbook one time in Bible class when you're a kid. This is really a significant thing that the Israelites were supposed to keep in memory, and it's a powerful, powerful image. We're going to talk about what it points to in the New Testament here in just a little bit. So verse 6, it says, That this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye these stones? Then you shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. Okay, so a couple of things here. Number one, it tells us the reason in the text of why they gather the stones. It's to be a sign, so when the children ask, what do these stones mean? This is where the waters of Jordan were cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah. So the word, the 10 Commandments, the stone tablets, all of that was inside of the ark. God was with them, and the ark goes into the water, and the water is cut off, and they're able to pass through the midst of the flood on dry ground because God was with them. And it would be a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. And I've talked about forever in the past. I even have another video on my YouTube channel about forever. Forever is, again, only for the time of the covenant. It's only for the time span allotted. A better way to say it would be for all time in question. And if you understand the way that forever is used in the context of the Old Testament, you understand that forever had an end. And so if you were to go to the Jordan River and you were to try to find the spot somewhere on the west bank of the Jordan where this pile of stones was, it may not be there. And I don't know. I'd have to take a look, but it wouldn't matter because the forever ended at the cross. There wasn't any need for the type anymore because the antitype has already come and the Old Testament has been fulfilled. So there isn't this stack of stones. There isn't a need for the stack of stones anymore. All right, verse 8. And the children of Israel did so as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of Jordan, as Jehovah spake unto Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them unto the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests, which bare the ark of the covenant, stood, and there unto this day. So, when you read this, first of all, there's two sets of stones. One, the men that were selected grabbed 12 stones, and they set them up where they camped. Joshua also sets up 12 stones in the middle of the river. That's what it says, in the midst of the water. That he sets them up. And it says they are there unto this day. Now, when we read this, Joshua is writing this down the road. Joshua is not writing this necessarily as he goes along, because when you read the letter, you go through several years of conquering. And then when we get to the end, the conquering is done. And so when you read this, they are there unto this day, this is because of the time span that has passed since these events happened and the time of the actual writing of the book of Joshua. It's also interesting that this language is used because when the children of Israel would read the book of Joshua moving forward, they're going to read that and they can be like, oh yeah, even now those stones are there. And I find it interesting because you have this huge river that they cross, and the water is being held back, and Joshua sets up these stones in the middle of the river as a testimony. And when that water comes rushing back down after everybody's gotten across, they don't move the stones. The stones remain where Joshua sets them, and so they still get to see the stones that are placed up, and they can't be small because they have to peek up out of the water to show the children of Israel, hey, this is where the priests stood when they were crossing the Jordan River. It's just a fascinating picture that we get here of all that's going on with the crossing of this river. All right. Verse 10, For the priest which bare the ark stood in the midst of Jordan until everything was finished that Jehovah commanded Joshua to speak unto the people, according to all that Moses commanded Joshua. And the people hasted and passed it over. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over, the ark of Jehovah passed over, and the priests in the presence of the people. So the priests go out into the middle, the people pass, all of the things that they were commanded to do, they do. And after everybody gets over to the other side, then the priests leave the river, and that's when the water comes back and is flowing again like it's supposed to be. All right. And then in verse 12, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the children of Israel, as Moses spake unto them. So we're kind of looking back at what happened, hey, they passed across, but remember, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh were going before everybody because that was their oath. That they said, "Oh, we get this land over here, but we're going to go ahead of everybody because we don't want it to be said that we were like the spies in the book of Numbers." And so they go first across the river because they're going to go first in all of the battles coming up. Then it says, about 40,000 prepared for war passed over before Jehovah unto battle to the plains of Jericho. So you got 40,000 warriors out of about 2 million people. Now, again, a large chunk of those are staying behind. And those are some pretty big tribes. So if we cut that number down, I'm just going to estimate about 1.5 million. We're still talking a lot of children and women and old people and servants and people who are not geared for war. If you remember back at the book of Numbers, all of the men totaled about 600,000. And that same number at the end of Numbers, when they get to this location, is about the same. So the 40,000 are the prime soldiers that will be approaching Jericho. It's not all of their warriors, but it's the ones that will be approaching Jericho as they get ready and are initially crossing. And we're really talking about these 2.5 tribes here, not all of the warriors altogether. A lot of people will say, well, maybe that's a contradiction, but it's not. Okay. On that day, Jehovah magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses all the days of his life. So again, from chapter 3, we said that Joshua hadn't had any real big sign that God was with him. There was no miracle after Moses had passed away yet that said that God was with Joshua. Well, here this sign happens. It's a major event. You can see what effect it has on Israel because it says that Jehovah magnifies Joshua. He says, here's Joshua, he is now my servant that is going to shepherd you like Moses did. And the people had that respect for him. They looked at Joshua the way they looked at Moses. The word fear here is used, but the word fear is not afraid or terrified, but it's more about the respect that they had as a leader and his capacity for guidance and judgment over them. As a leader, and so a lot of people will say, well, God is all about fear and being afraid and stuff. It's not the same kind of fear. The word is different here. And so Joshua is seen as Moses is seen. He is now been given this sign, and they can see that he has God's pleasure, that he has God's okay, seal of approval. And it says, Jehovah spoke unto Joshua, saying, command the priests that bear the ark of the testimony that they come up out of Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, come ye up out of Jordan. And it came to pass, when the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord were come up out of the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up unto the dry land, that the waters of Jordan returned unto their place, and flowed over all his banks as they did before. So there's an interesting parallel here. Again, Joshua is taking the place of Moses. Joshua is a leader, very much like Moses was. But Joshua, his role is as this commanding conqueror. Joshua is not just a peaceful shepherd. He's not just a guide. He isn't the one that is related to saving Israel from out of Egypt, but he is the commanding conqueror. And he commands the priests because he is in charge of them. And here's where I want to begin the New Testament parallel. When we look especially at the book of Revelation, we see Jesus pictured as the rider on the white horse, the commander of angelic armies. Now, those are typified or they're figurative in that Jesus used the Roman army to come in and conquer the Jews, which were persecuting the church. But this image we have of Joshua going in and leading the people to conquer the enemies of Israel is antityped in Christ as the rider on the white horse going in and conquering the Jews, who were the wicked nation that needed to be wiped out in the new earth. And when we see this picture, Joshua has command over the priests in the same way that Christ has command over his priests, which are all Christians, because we are a kingdom of priests. And so that parallel there is very, very powerful. A lot of people don't get it. I've never heard that in my life. It took study to understand what was being typified here, and why is this chapter making such a big deal of them crossing over the Jordan. And when we talk about this idea of the waters, which we'll do here in a minute, we're talking about how the church crossed over from its period of when it was being established to becoming this conquering force. And I'll talk more about that as we get to it. So verse 19, and the people came up out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and encamped in Gilgal, in the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of Jordan did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. And he spoke unto the children of Israel, saying, when your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what mean these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over the Jordan on dry land. So there's the 12 stones in Gilgal, not the same as the 12 that were in the midst of the river. But then I want to get into verse 23 and 24. For Jehovah your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, until you were passed over, as Jehovah your God did the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us until we were gone over. That all the people of the earth, that word earth there is talking about the promised land, might know the hand of Jehovah, that it is mighty, that you might fear Jehovah your God forever. So the water here is symbolic of the flood that would come in the days of the destruction of Jerusalem. The flood in this case would be the Roman army. God was in the midst of that, and no Christians are harmed as that flood comes in. So they were in the midst of the flood, but it was dry for them. It was on either side. And so the typifying here is that as Israel crossed safely over the Jordan, the Christians crossed safely over into the new earth, the new land, as the flood of the Roman army came in and wiped out their persecutors, which were the Jews. And again, never heard that before. It took personal study. These are my own conclusions on this, but I think the parallel is very clear that this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the end of the establishment period. We're seeing the now church is going to go in, and we're going to conquer the new earth for Christ. We go out and we spread the gospel and reach out into all the world and do that. So, and we are to know that the hand of Jehovah is mighty, and that we should have that awe and that respect of God, just like the Israelites did for the entire time that they were a nation. So anyway, that is Joshua chapter 4. I hope those conclusions made sense. As always, I look forward to your questions, and we will see you next time for Joshua chapter 5. My name is Ernie Lawrence. This has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation.